My name's Gabe Philippe. I'm Senior Director of California Sourcing and Farming for Mission Produce. We are a global packer shipper, the largest in the world. We have distribution centers around the U.S. and packing houses around the globe. This operation here is a joint venture with Cal Poly State University. It's a long-term partnership that we went into with Cal Poly. It's been a very successful operation. We've managed to sustain yields of around 18,000 pounds per acre here, year in, year out. And I'll let Blake introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Blake Petrucci. I'm the Regional Farm Manager for Mission Produce in San Luis Obispo County. So I manage 3 different ranches, one here in San Luis Obispo and 2 a little bit farther north in Cayucas, totaling about 170 acres. And I manage the day-to-day operations of all the duties that involve our farming practice here.
A lot of growers come to us and ask us, what's the correct way to prune? And usually what we tell them is, just to prune something every year. What we try to do is maintain our tree heights to 80% of the row width. So if we have a 20-foot row, we like the trees to be no taller than 16 foot, roughly. So a lot of times that means we have to prune down to 12 foot, and then the trees regrow to about 16. Yeah, ideally we prune 15 to 20% of the tree's canopy on any given year, and we like to manipulate a different portion of the tree every year. And within our groves, we do a mix of different pruning within certain blocks. So we might take 10% of the grove and thin out the number of trees. So in this case, we're standing next to a tree that was removed about 2 years ago. So we've actually reduced the density from, this was 16 by 20, 16 foot in between the trees, 20 foot in between the rows. We've actually reduced the density from 136 trees to half of that. In older groves, we might choose to thin out or remove every other tree on 10% of the total acreage within a ranch. And then on 40% of the acreage, we might aggressively top the trees. And then on the other 50%, we might remove a quadrant or take out a center limb within the trees. So if we go in and do a variety of different pruning within the grove, the next year we do something totally different. So if we topped a tree the previous year, then we will just remove a limb. If we removed every other tree within a grove, then we'll go in that following year and actually top that section. So every year we're manipulating a different portion of the tree. That's allowing us to mitigate the alternate bearing tendencies of the avocado. It's allowing us to produce budwood on certain trees for 2 years out, produce aggressive budwood. So the trees that we top this year, they're really going to come on heavy 2 years from now. So what we're noticing is by pruning with this strategy, we always have a block within the grove that has 20 to 30,000 pounds per acre on it, and then we'll have other sections that might have 5,000 pounds per acre. The sections that we topped aggressively the previous year will have a light crop the following year, and then the sections where we removed one branch, they might have 10 to 12,000 pounds to the acre on it. So once you sum all of those, the combination of different pruning techniques up, we end up with somewhere close to 18,000 pounds to the acre year in, year out here.
So ultimately we prune to increase our fruit set and our fruit size on each of the trees, whether it's that year or the year after or 2 years out. And that increased fruit set and fruit size comes by way of light penetration all the way through to the floor of the grove. So when we cut out parts of the tree, we're getting more light into each individual tree as well as down to other trees along the base of them, and that's going to allow more flowering to happen on all sides of the tree, which in turn will have a greater fruit set. This also gives us the ability to grow fresh, aggressive budwood, and which in turn will flower the year after, and bring light into trees that are otherwise older or shaded out that can benefit from that rejuvenation of more light, more photosynthesis, more activity.
We also prune to reduce water demand in some cases. If it's a short water year and we need to cut back, then we prune more aggressively to reduce tree demand. We also prune to obviously lower tree heights, so it's cheaper to harvest. And in addition, you're not bringing big ladders into the grove, so you're reducing your liability within the grove also. As Blake mentioned, we prune to increase the surface area. So in a lot of groves, older groves, you see the trees canopy out and all the fruit is at the very top of the tree. When the strong winds come, a lot of that fruit gets blown off. So we like to have layers of fruit on the sides and the center of the tree, so on the tops of the tree all the way around, so that when those strong winds come, the trees actually protect themselves and can keep more of the fruit that they set every year. As far as the costs associated with pruning, the pruning costs can vary dramatically depending on the type of pruning that you're doing and the age of the trees. When the trees are young, you're going to do very minimal pruning, oftentimes just tipping, maybe opening up the center of the tree to make it look like an open vase, but very minimal pruning the first 3 years or so, and that the cost is very low for that. So in general, I would say pruning costs can run anywhere from $200 an acre up to $3,000 an acre or more if you're completely removing sections or stumping trees back to 4 to 6 feet tall. That's where it gets costly. But on average, we're probably spending somewhere in the realm of $650 an acre on pruning, doing the variety of different techniques that we have within the grove.
So all of our pruning is done by hand with manual labor. That's done, the majority of the work is done with pole saws, which are long chainsaws, to get into some of these trees that are normally bigger. We also utilize some smaller hand chainsaws that can be operated with one hand, as well as manual pole pruners, which use a chain and a blade. But like I said, overall we use pole saws, motorized chainsaws to do the majority of the work. The small saws come in handy for smaller trees, so you have smaller, younger trees and you're removing a center limb that may be down at waist level. It would be a little cumbersome to bring a longer pole saw in that case.
One of the reasons we like to use the mechanical power pruners is because it allows us to do all the work from the ground. We don't have to bring ladders in and have guys with chainsaws up on ladders, so they can reach up 12 foot, no problem with the mechanical power pruner and top the trees. Those pruners can cut trees that are 8 inches in diameter, no problem. So that's the method that we prefer.
For larger cuts, say we are taking a large center limb out of the middle of the tree, or a large quadrant, say a 6 or greater inch diameter limb, it's often necessary to undercut the bottom of that limb make multiple incremental cuts starting from the top so as not to rip off and strip a large piece of bark from the tree when that limb comes falling down after the majority of the cut is made. And so that's just common chainsaw practice and good practice for that.
If we had flat terrain and a grove that was opened up, then we would look to mechanical pruning. The only downside to that is a lot of times you're still going in there with manual labor, making additional cuts, and you still have to pull that brush out manually. So it is cheaper to make the initial cuts mechanically, but in the long run, it's the total cost is you're not probably saving much by going mechanically. We like to prune between the months of February through April. By pruning at those times, we're allowing the fruit to be marketed. So at that point, all sizes are released. So we can start in February and pick a tree and cut those branches off and actually market that fruit, which will in turn pay for the pruning practice itself. Another reason we like to prune at that time is it's before the tree's setting fruit, and it's early on in the season, so that if we open a tree up, we're going to get sunlight into the center of the tree to allow budwood creation that season. So if you delay and prune in midsummer, then you're losing that opportunity to create that budwood in the middle of the tree for that year. Another reason why we like to prune February, March, April, I mean ideally it'd be March and April in my opinion, is we've noticed that if your grove is susceptible to frost damage, then the trees that we've pruned in the wintertime get hit harder than the trees that were unpruned or left untouched. So that's another reason why we like to wait until, say, March 15th. In most areas, the frost threat is over with by that time, and we get going. One other practice that is kind of controversial, given that a lot of people are pitching high density groves, we're not opposed to that. We feel that planting high density will get you into max production a couple years earlier versus planting at a more standard density. But a lot of growers, I think, are taking an approach where they're not going the standard 109 tree to the acre density. They're not doing 400 trees to the acre, but maybe they plant somewhere around 200 trees to the acre. And like with this grove, and I think with any grove, if you plant high density in California, given the tools that we have, you need to have it in your plan to remove trees. You know, if you're planting 400 trees to the acre, in my opinion, you're probably going to need to remove some of those trees at about year 5 or 6. If you plant 150 trees to the acre, you might want to start thinking about removing trees year 10 or 12. So that's kind of where this grove stands. We've picked out certain areas, maybe our tightest areas, our most canopied areas, and we've started in those sections and have gradually removed about 10% of the grove year by year. And eventually the entire grove will be half the density within the next 5 years to what we planted the trees in 2003. We feel that the benefits of pruning outweigh the risks, so there's always a chance that we can transfer disease such as sun blotch disease from one tree to the next. If we know that we have sun blotch within the groves, then we're sanitizing our equipment in between trees. But all in all, we feel that the benefits of pruning outweigh the risks.